An 80-year-old man could no longer live in his beloved cabin because his children wanted to put him in a care home and sell the cabin. However, he decided to give the cabin to a homeless woman who had helped him. His children wouldn't allow it, and what happened next surprised everyone. Robert, an 80-year-old man, sat every day on the porch of his old cabin where he had lived for decades. The house, full of memories and stories, was his refuge since his wife's death. There, he felt her presence in the little things, the smell of coffee in the morning, the soft light entering through the windows at sunset, and the echoes of laughter that once filled the rooms. His children, worried about his health and safety, insisted he move to a care home. They believed it would be better for him, with constant medical care and the company of people his age. However, Robert didn't want to leave the cabin he loved so much, and the idea of leaving behind a lifetime of memories made him deeply sad. Robert's children saw their father's love for the house as an obstacle. They discussed, argued, and tried to persuade him in every way. One rainy weekend, Robert's children showed up at the cabin, determined to convince him once and for all. They brought brochures from care homes, showed pictures of comfortable rooms, and talked about all the activities he could participate in. But nothing seemed to shake Robert's decision. He knew his children had good intentions, but the weight of the history that the cabin carried was much greater than any benefit a care home could offer. The debate continued for hours, with raised voices and tears. Exhausted and aware that he was being pressured by those he loved, Robert finally gave in. With a heavy heart, he agreed to move to the care home, albeit reluctantly. His children sighed with relief, believing they had done the best for him. But Robert, looking for the last time at every corner of the cabin, knew he was leaving behind not just a house, but a part of himself. Since his beloved wife passed away, Robert had clung even more to the cabin where they had lived together. But the loneliness of recent years had been eased by an unexpected figure. Caroline, a homeless woman who had appeared at his door one day. Caroline asked for nothing but an opportunity to help, and in return she received something much greater than she could have imagined. Caroline met Robert by chance, on a day when she found him struggling to carry heavy grocery bags. Without hesitation, she offered to help. From that moment on, an unlikely friendship blossomed. Caroline began visiting Robert regularly, helping with household chores, keeping him company, and often bringing a smile to his face. Gradually, Robert began to see Caroline not just as a friend, but as a kind of guardian of the cabin. He recognized how much she valued each act of kindness he offered, and how she cared for the place as if it were her own home. Robert saw in Caroline someone who understood the true value of the cabin and the memories it held. Over time, Robert made a decision that would surprise his children and change Caroline's life forever. He wanted to leave his cabin to her. Robert knew that by doing so, he would be ensuring that the place he loved so much would be in good hands. He believed that Caroline, more than anyone, deserved a home where she could start over and find peace. But his children did not understand this special bond. To them, the cabin was just a property that could be sold, a financial asset. They didn't see the soul of the house, the stories the bricks told, nor Caroline's importance in Robert's life. So when Robert expressed his wish to leave the house to Caroline, his children were furious. To them, the idea seemed absurd. How could their father, a man who had always valued family, want to leave his house to a stranger, a homeless woman they barely knew? The discussion was intense. The tension in the air was heavy. Robert, sitting in the worn leather armchair that had been his companion for so many years, tried to explain his decision. He spoke about Caroline's friendship and kindness, how she had helped him overcome loneliness and the genuine affection she showed for the cabin. But his children didn't want to listen. They saw Caroline as an intruder, an opportunist. They argued that the cabin should stay in the family, that it was part of their heritage. They accused Robert of being naive, of putting his emotions before logic. "Dad, you can't be serious," exclaimed the eldest son, his voice filled with incredulity. "This woman came out of nowhere. We know nothing about her, and you want to give our house to her?" The youngest daughter, trying to be more diplomatic but equally opposed, said, "Dad, we understand that you like her, that she keeps you company, but that's not a reason to make such a drastic decision. Don't you think you're being hasty?" Robert, feeling the weight of his children's words, remained firm. He knew the decision was hard to accept, but he also knew it was the right one. He tried once more to make them see beyond the surface, to understand the true intention behind his gesture. Caroline brought me joy and help when I needed it most. She cared for me in this house like no one else. I know you're worried, but the cabin needs someone who loves and cares for it, and I believe that person is Caroline. But his children didn't budge. To them, the cabin was a matter of family legacy and financial security. They couldn't see the depth of the connection between Robert and Caroline or understand the emotional value that decision had for their father. The meeting ended in frustration and tears. The children left the cabin, leaving Robert alone with his memories and the certainty that he was doing the best for Caroline, even if it meant facing his own family's disapproval. Since the death of his beloved wife, Robert had lived alone in the cabin they built together. The house, situated on the edge of a serene forest, was a symbol of their love and the memories they shared over the years. Every corner, every detail, carried the mark of their life together. Robert and his wife Margaret had transformed the cabin into a cozy home. They planted flowers in the garden, decorated the rooms with family photos, and filled the place with laughter and stories. After Margaret's death, the cabin became a silent sanctuary where Robert sought refuge with his memories. Mornings were the hardest. Robert woke up alone, Margaret's side of the bed empty and cold. The smell of fresh coffee no longer had the same aroma without her around. The routine activities they once did together were now solitary and slow. He walked through the garden, tending to the flowers Margaret loved so much, as a way to keep her presence alive. Robert spent long hours sitting on the porch, watching the leaves move in the wind and the birds visiting. It was in these quiet moments that he felt Margaret's absence most intensely, yet at the same time, he found comfort in the memories of the happy days they spent there. Loneliness was his constant companion until the day Caroline appeared. The unexpected friendship brought a new sparkle to Robert's eyes. The conversations, the laughter, and her company somehow filled the void left by Margaret. But even with Caroline's presence, Robert never stopped feeling the absence of his wife. Every night before sleeping, he looked at Margaret's photo on the bedside table and whispered, "Good night, my love." And so, day by day, Robert continued living in the cabin, nurturing the memories of a shared life while trying to find new ways to move forward, even if slowly, even if painfully. It was on an ordinary day with the sun shining gently through the trees that Caroline and Robert first met. Robert, with his slow and careful steps, was carrying 2 heavy grocery bags, struggling to reach the cabin. Age made the task arduous, but he insisted on doing everything alone. Caroline, a homeless woman who often roamed the area, watched the people around her with an attentive and empathetic eye. That day, she saw Robert struggling with the bags and didn't hesitate to approach him. "Can I help you with that?" Caroline asked with a gentle smile. Robert, surprised by the unexpected offer, hesitated for a moment. He wasn't used to accepting help, but something in Caroline's sincere expression made him accept. "That would be very kind of you," he replied, handing her one of the bags. As they walked together towards the cabin, they talked about small things: the weather, the flowers along the way, the birds singing. Caroline, with her simple and warm manner, made Robert feel at ease. She listened with interest when he mentioned his late wife and the cabin that was now his solitary refuge. Upon arriving, Caroline helped put the groceries in the kitchen. Grateful for her company and help, Robert offered her some tea. They sat at the small kitchen table, talking as if they were old friends. Caroline shared a bit of her own story, how life had led her to the streets, but she never lost hope for better days. That afternoon marked the beginning of a friendship that would change both their lives. Caroline began visiting Robert regularly, helping him with groceries and other tasks, and in return, receiving his warm hospitality. Robert found in Caroline a companionship that warmed his lonely heart, and Caroline found in Robert a friend who accepted her without judgment. Over time, Robert's cabin became a second home for Caroline, and although both carried their own pains and challenges, they found in each other a silent comfort, a mutual understanding that flourished in every act of shared kindness. From that first encounter, Robert and Caroline's lives intertwined in an unexpected and beautiful way. Carolina, with her generous soul and open heart, brought a refreshing energy every time she came to the cabin, illuminating Robert's lonely days. Days became lighter. Caroline helped organize the house and tended the garden that Margaret loved so much. They shared life stories, laughed at small things, and sometimes just enjoyed the silence together. For Robert, every visit from Caroline was like a breath of fresh air. He began to look forward to her visits, eager to share a cup of tea and talk about everything and nothing at the same time. Caroline, in turn, felt useful and valued, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Robert's cabin became a place of refuge for her, a place where she was welcomed and respected. Their friendship strengthened with each simple gesture of care and compassion. Robert, who once lived isolated and trapped in past memories, began to open up to new experiences and joys. He showed Caroline old photo albums, told stories about Margaret, and revealed the secrets of the garden he tended with so much love. Caroline, in return, shared her own stories, her struggles and dreams. Robert listened attentively and offered words of wisdom and comfort. Their relationship was built on a foundation of mutual respect and deep understanding. Both found in their friendship a way to heal, transforming loneliness into a meaningful connection. The neighbors began to notice Caroline's constant presence at the cabin. Some commented, others just watched with curiosity. But for Robert and Caroline, what mattered was their bond. It wasn't just the help Caroline offered, but the friendship and trust that formed between them. Each day together was a new page written in their lives, a page of overcoming, of acceptance, and of an unlikely friendship that brought light to Robert's dark days and hope to Caroline's weary heart. And so, the cabin that was once a symbol of loneliness transformed into a shared home where the past and present met in harmony. The inevitable happened on a grey winter morning. Without Caroline's knowledge, Robert's children decided it was time to move him to the care home. Concerned for their father's health and determined to ensure his safety, they acted without considering the deep bonds he had formed with Caroline. The farewell was silent and painful. Robert, with a heavy heart, looked one last time at the cabin that was his refuge and joy. He wanted to tell Caroline, to explain the situation, but his children were impatient and feared he would change his mind. They quickly packed his belongings, and before the sun had a chance to disperse the clouds, Robert was being taken to the care home. Caroline arrived at the cabin that same day as usual. She brought some flowers she had picked to brighten the house. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She tried again, calling Robert's name, but all she heard was the echo of silence. She felt a tightness in her chest, a sense that something was wrong. She walked around the cabin looking for any sign of her friend. She noticed the door was locked, and some windows were closed in a way they never were when Robert was home. Caroline, confused and worried, waited for hours, hoping Robert would appear with his usual smile. But the day passed, and the night brought only more questions and uncertainties. In the following days, Caroline continued to visit the cabin, hoping to find Robert. Each unanswered visit increased her anxiety. She wondered if something serious had happened, if he was okay, if he would return someday. The loneliness that once belonged only to Robert now enveloped her as well. Finally, after days of searching, Caroline heard from a neighbor what had happened. Robert had been taken to a care home by his children. The news hit her like a blow. She felt betrayed, not by Robert, but by the way everything happened without her knowing. Sadness overwhelmed her, but she knew she needed to see Robert to know how he was. Determined, Caroline went to the care home. When she finally found Robert, her heart filled with relief and pain at the same time. There he was, sitting in a wheelchair, looking out the window with a distant look. When he saw her, Robert's eyes lit up for a brief moment, but soon returned to reflect the sadness of separation. Caroline approached, holding Robert's hand firmly. "I didn't know, Robert. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." "I wanted to tell you, Caroline," Robert said, his voice full of regret. "But my children decided everything so quickly. I didn't have a chance to say goodbye properly. I'm happy you came." Caroline squeezed Robert's hand tightly. "It doesn't matter, Robert. What matters is that I'm here now, and I won't leave you alone again." There in that cold and impersonal care home, the friendship between Robert and Caroline shone brighter than ever. They knew that, Even separated by the decision imposed by his children, their bond was unbreakable. And as they talked, sitting together, both found solace in each other's presence even though the future was uncertain. They sat side by side, their hands intertwined as if time and distance didn't matter. Caroline told Robert everything that had happened since his sudden departure, how she had searched for him and missed him every day. Robert, in turn, shared his experiences in the care home, the days that seemed to drag on endlessly, and the unbearable longing for the cabin and her company. From that day on, Caroline visited Robert whenever she could. Each visit was a ray of sunshine in Robert's monotonous life, bringing him joy and comfort. They talked, laughed, and for a few moments forgot the care home's walls around them. Caroline brought life to Robert's room, decorating it with flowers from the garden and memories from the cabin. The nurses and other residents of the care home noticed the change in Robert. He seemed more animated, more alive. Caroline's presence was a balm for his soul, something no medicine could provide. And although they were physically separated from the cabin, it still lived in their hearts and conversations, an eternal symbol of friendship and love. Together, they faced the days with courage and hope, knowing that despite the adversities, they had each other. And so the bond between Robert and Caroline continued to grow, strong and unbreakable, even within the walls of the care home. On a spring day, with the sun shining gently through the window of Robert's room at the care home, Caroline arrived for another of her visits. She brought fresh flowers from the garden she now tended in honor of Robert and Margaret. Her presence lit up the room, bringing a sense of warmth and comfort. Sitting side by side, as they always did, they talked about memories of the cabin, the stories they lived, and the dreams they shared. But that day, Robert seemed more thoughtful, as if something important was on his mind. "Caroline," he began, holding her hand with surprising firmness, "there is something I need to tell you." Caroline looked at him, intrigued, but with an encouraging smile. "What is it, Robert?" He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on hers. "Since the day you came into my life, you brought a light I thought I had lost forever. Your friendship, your kindness, transformed my days and gave me a new reason to live." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "You changed my life too, Robert. I will never be able to thank you enough for everything." Robert nodded, emotional. "That's why I want you to know that the cabin, our cabin, will be yours. I've made legal arrangements for you to have it when I'm no longer here." Caroline was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of Robert's words. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled, a smile full of gratitude and love. "Robert, I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have ever imagined. The cabin means so much to me, but not as much as your friendship." Robert smiled back, his eyes shining with tears. "You deserve it, Caroline. You brought life back to that place, and to me. I know you will care for the cabin as we did. And so, a part of Margaret and me will always be with you." Caroline hugged him tenderly, feeling the warmth and sincerity of that moment. "I promise, Robert. I promise to care for the cabin, the memories, and the love you and Margaret shared there. And I will always remember you." They stayed like that for a while, in a silent embrace that spoke more than words could express. In that instant, all the difficulties and challenges they faced seemed distant, replaced by a deep sense of peace and purpose. Carolina knew the responsibility Robert entrusted to her was great, but she also knew she was ready to honor her promise. And as the spring sun shone, she felt that somehow everything was exactly where it should be. In that same spring, just a few days after revealing his plans for the cabin to Caroline, Robert passed away. The news hit Caroline like a cold wind on a sunny day, taking her breath away and bringing tears to her eyes. On their last visit, Caroline and Robert had shared laughter and memories, not knowing it would be their final goodbye. When Caroline left Robert's room that afternoon, he watched her walk away with a serene smile, feeling at peace knowing his beloved cabin was in good hands. The sun shone gently, and the sounds of the garden were a distant echo of the life he loved. Robert passed away peacefully during the night in his sleep, with a light smile on his face. The nurses at the care home found him like that, with an expression of serenity that touched everyone. It seemed that, in the end, he had found the tranquility he had long sought. Caroline received the news while she was at the market, buying some flowers to take to Robert. Upon hearing the words from the care home staff, the flowers fell from her hands, scattering on the ground. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as she tried to process the loss of her dear friend. With a heavy heart, Caroline made her way to the care home one last time. Entering Robert's room, she was met with absolute silence. The memories of the moments they shared there flooded her mind, and tears flowed freely down her face. She approached Robert's bed and held his cold hand, as if wanting to convey all the love and gratitude she felt. "Thank you, Robert," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for everything. I will take care of the cabin, and I will never forget you." Caroline stayed there for a while in silent mourning, feeling Robert's presence by her side. She knew that from that moment on, the responsibility of honoring Robert and Margaret's memory was hers, and she was determined to fulfill that promise, transforming the cabin into a place of love and welcome just as Robert had wished. Robert's funeral was simple, but filled with emotion. Caroline was there, along with Robert's children and a few friends. During the ceremony, she remembered all the special moments they shared and the life lessons he taught her. She felt a mix of sadness and gratitude, knowing that despite the loss, their friendship had been an invaluable gift. At the end of the day, Caroline returned to the cabin, now hers. Entering, she felt Robert's presence in every corner, in every object, in every memory, and as the sun set on the horizon, she promised herself she would live her life according to the values and love Robert had taught her, keeping the essence of that unique friendship alive. She cleaned each room with care, rearranged the furniture, and planted new flowers in the garden, remembering how much Robert and Margaret loved that place. One afternoon, while tidying Robert's room, Caroline noticed a small bump in the wooden floor near the bed. Curious, she knelt down and began to investigate. Gently, she removed some loose floorboards and, to her surprise, found an old metal box. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing an unexpected secret. Inside the box was a significant amount of money, carefully rolled and stored. Caroline was astonished, unable to believe what she was seeing. Along with the money, she found a letter written by Robert. With her heart racing, she unfolded the yellowed paper and began to read. "Dear Caroline, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer around. I hope this money helps you have a better life. Since the day we met, you brought light and joy to my lonely days. I can never repay all that you have done for me, but I hope this gesture is a small token of my gratitude. The cabin is now yours, and I want you to use this money to make any improvements you wish and to ensure your well-being. You deserve a chance to start anew, to find happiness and security. This was the best way I could find to help you, just as you helped me. With affection and gratitude, Robert." Caroline finished reading the letter with tears streaming down her face. Robert's words echoed in her heart, filling her with deep emotion. She had never expected anything like this, and Robert's generosity touched her deeply. She knew that the money meant more than just a gift. It was a continuation of the care and friendship he had always shown. Determined to honor Robert's wishes, Caroline began planning how she would use the money to transform the cabin into a true home. She made small renovations, improved the house's structure, and tended the garden with even more dedication. Every change, every improvement, was done in homage to Robert and Margaret, keeping alive the spirit of love and generosity they had cultivated in that place. Caroline also used part of the money to help other homeless people, just as Robert had done for her. She felt it was the best way to repay the kindness she had received, spreading the love and compassion she had learned from her friend. And so, the cabin was not just a physical shelter, but a symbol of friendship, overcoming adversity, and generosity. Each passing day, Caroline felt Robert's presence, guiding and inspiring her to be a better person, to live a full and meaningful life, honoring the memory of a friend who changed her life forever. Every day at the break of dawn, she dedicated herself to her work with renewed vigor, knowing that each improvement was a tribute to the friend who had given her so much. The first project was the restoration of the garden, one of Margaret's favorite places. Caroline planted new flowers, carefully choosing the species Margaret loved the most. Roses, lilies, and daisies began to color the space, bringing new life to the garden. She installed a small wooden bench where Robert used to sit and contemplate the beauty around him. It was the perfect spot for reflection and feeling their presence. Inside the cabin, Caroline decided to renovate the kitchen, the heart of the house. She painted the walls a soft yellow, bringing warmth and brightness to the environment. She reorganized the furniture, keeping the old table where so many meals and important conversations had taken place. Every detail was carefully thought out, preserving the essence of the place while adding her own personal touch. In Robert's room, Caroline made sure to keep intact the objects he valued, but added new curtains and comfortable bedding. It was a way to keep the space cozy, just as he always liked. Margaret's photo remained on the bedside table, a constant reminder of the love that resided there. The bathroom was another focus of the renovations. Carolina replaced the old tiles, installed a new sink, and brought touches of modernity while respecting the cabin's rustic style. Small details, like soft towels and comfortable rugs, transformed the space into a haven of tranquility. The living room received special attention. Carolina cleaned and polished the wooden furniture, preserving the welcoming and inviting character of the environment. She added some colorful cushions and a new rug, creating a perfect space for relaxation. She placed some new photos on the shelves, happy moments from her new life alongside the old memories of Robert and Margaret. One of the last renovations was the construction of a small porch at the cabin's entrance. Caroline wanted a place where she could sit and appreciate the sunset, remembering the conversations she had with Robert. She decorated the space with flower pots and a rocking chair, an invitation to moments of peace and reflection. Every improvement made by Caroline was an act of love, a tribute to Robert's legacy, and as she worked, she felt Robert's presence in every corner, guiding and inspiring her to create a home where his and Margaret's memory could live on forever. Despite all the improvements and the care she took with the cabin, Caroline knew that Robert's children had not fully accepted her presence there. They saw the house as part of their inheritance, a valuable asset that should remain in the family. The relationship between Caroline and Robert's children was always tense, marked by distrust and misunderstanding. One autumn day, while Caroline was planting new flowers in the garden, Robert's children arrived unexpectedly. Without preamble, they began to speak directly and coldly. "Caroline, we need to talk," said the eldest son, arms crossed and with a severe expression. "This cabin belongs to our family and you are not part of it." Caroline felt a lump in her throat but remained calm. "I understand that you see it that way, but Robert left this house to me. He wanted me to take care of it, to continue his legacy." The youngest daughter shook her head impatiently. "This is absurd. He was old and confused. We're not going to let a stranger keep the house that should be ours." The other children nodded, forming a barrier of opposition. Caroline, feeling cornered, tried to explain the depth of her friendship with Robert and how much the cabin meant to both of them. But her arguments fell on deaf ears. "You need to leave," said the middle son, in a tone that brooked no argument. "We are selling the house and you have no place here." With a heavy heart, Caroline looked around at every corner of the cabin that had become her home, at the garden she had tended with so much love. She knew that arguing would not help. With tears in her eyes, she began to gather her things, each item laden with memories and meanings. Robert's children watched in silence, offering no help or consolation. To them, it was merely a matter of reclaiming what they believed was rightfully theirs. For Caroline, it was like losing not just a home, but a part of herself. As she packed her few possessions, Caroline found Robert's old letter. His words of affection and gratitude gave her the strength to carry on. She knew that even though she was being forced out, she would carry with her the memories and love Robert had shared. Caroline left the cabin, closing the door with one last look at the place that meant so much to her. She walked through the garden one last time, feeling the cold autumn breeze caress her face. With a mix of sadness and determination, she left, promising herself she would find a way to honor Robert's memory, wherever she might be. And so Caroline departed from the cabin, leaving behind the physical space but carrying in her heart the strength and love she had found there. She knew that somehow this was not the final word in her story with Robert and the cabin he loved so dearly. Robert's children, now in possession of the cabin, wasted no time in putting it up for sale. To them, the house was merely a financial asset, a property that could be quickly converted into cash. Ignoring the sentimental value the cabin held for Robert and Caroline, they sought out a realtor and set the price at $107,000. Caroline, displaced and destitute, saw the sale advertisement with a mix of pain and anger. Every word of the ad was a cruel reminder of the loss she had suffered. The cabin, her refuge and Robert's legacy, was being treated as a mere commodity. Robert's children began showing the house to potential buyers. The visits were constant, and the cabin, once a place of tranquility, became a point of commerce. Each person who entered looked around, evaluating walls, furniture, and land with a critical eye, oblivious to the stories and memories embedded in every corner. Caroline watched from a distance, powerless to stop it. She felt a deep pain seeing strangers trampling through the garden she had tended with so much care, stepping on the flowers she had planted in honor of Margaret and Robert. The cabin, which had been a symbol of friendship and love, was now reduced to a simple business transaction. The price of $107,000 seemed fair to Robert's children, who were determined to sell quickly. They completely ignored the emotional and historical values that the house represented. To them, money was what mattered. But the cabin didn't find immediate buyers. There was something in the air, a silent resistance that seemed to protect that place. The realtor suggested small renovations to make it more appealing, but each suggested change seemed to further disrespect the essence of what Robert and Caroline had built there. Meanwhile, Caroline did not give up. She sought legal help, trying to find a way to reverse the situation. She knew Robert had left the cabin to her, but without official documents, her struggle seemed futile. Even so, she continued to search for alternatives, determined not to let her friend's memory be erased so easily. Days passed, and the cabin remained for sale with no real interest. It seemed that Robert's spirit still protected that place, preventing it from becoming something he never wanted. Caroline felt this presence and, despite all the pain, kept alive the hope that somehow she would be able to reclaim the cabin and honor the promise she had made to Robert. Caroline was almost losing hope, but life has its own ways of surprising us. One day, while walking through the town, she met an old friend of Robert's, Mr. Thompson, a lawyer. They talked about the cabin's situation and the injustice Caroline faced. Thompson, well aware of Robert's character and his friendship with Caroline, decided to help. Quietly, Mr. Thompson began investigating the legal possibilities to ensure that Robert's wishes were respected. He discovered old documents that reinforced Robert's intention to leave the cabin to Caroline. Motivated by justice and his friend's memory, Thompson devised a plan to reclaim the cabin. Without Robert's children's knowledge, Thompson contacted the real estate agent. Pretending to be an interested buyer, he offered $135,000 for the cabin, a significantly higher amount than initially asked. Robert's children, seeing an unexpected profit, accepted the offer without hesitation. The transaction was swift and efficient. Robert's children, satisfied with the profit, did not question the buyer's identity or intentions. They signed the papers and left, finally disinterested in the cabin that had caused so much conflict. Once Thompson finalized the purchase, he sought out Caroline. He found her in the small apartment she had managed to rent temporarily. With a smile on his lips and a twinkle in his eye, he handed her the cabin keys and the property documents. "Caroline," he said, holding her hands, "Robert wanted you to have the cabin, and now it is officially yours. I used the money he had saved to ensure this." Caroline was stunned, unable to hold back tears of joy and relief. She hugged Thompson with gratitude, feeling an enormous weight lifted from her shoulders. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Thompson. You have fulfilled Robert's wish and my dream." "It was the least I could do," Thompson replied, smiling. "Robert was a great friend, and I knew how much this was important to him. Now, it's up to you to continue taking care of the cabin as he wished." With her heart overflowing with emotion, Caroline returned to the cabin. The feeling of passing through the door as the rightful owner was indescribable. She walked through each room, touching the furniture, feeling the walls, and breathing in the familiar air. The house seemed to whisper welcomes, as if Robert and Margaret were still there, smiling with approval. And so, with the unexpected help of Mr. Thompson, the cabin was returned to Carolina. She knew that now she could fully fulfill her promise to Robert, keeping the house full of life, love, and memories. The cabin, which had already witnessed so many stories of friendship and overcoming, was ready to be the backdrop for many new chapters, all imbued with Robert's generous spirit. Robert's children, now at ease with the money from the cabin's sale in their bank accounts, were taken by surprise when they encountered Caroline in town, visibly better off. With her new clothes and a renewed sparkle in her eyes, Caroline began to frequent the same places they did, and it was during one of these casual encounters that the inevitable shock happened. They were sitting in a cafe, discussing their plans for the newly acquired money, when Caroline walked in. The eldest son, upon recognizing her, frowned in confusion. "Caroline, what are you doing here?" She smiled, not in a smug way, but serenely and confidently. "Hello, I'm just taking care of some things in town." The youngest daughter, even more perplexed, observed the details. Caroline looked well cared for, her clothes simple but clearly new. "How did you manage this?" she asked, the suspicion evident in her voice. Carolina, always honest and direct, sat at the table next to them and looked at them firmly. "A friend of Robert's helped me ensure that I could take care of the cabin, as he always wanted." The siblings exchanged suspicious glances. "What do you mean by that?" insisted the middle son, trying to understand. "Robert left money for me, and his lawyer helped me buy the cabin back," Caroline explained. "I used the money to make the necessary renovations and to ensure the house remained a place of love and memories, just as Robert wished." The expressions of surprise on Robert's children's faces were unmistakable. They had underestimated Carolina, assuming her departure from the cabin would be final and that she wouldn't have the means to reverse the situation. Seeing her not only back in the cabin, but also in a better financial position was an unexpected blow. "The lawyer bought the cabin in your name?" the eldest son asked incredulously. Caroline nodded. "Yes, he knew Robert's wishes and wanted to honor them, just as I do. I'm taking care of the cabin, and that's what Robert wanted." Robert's children fell silent, processing the turn of events. To them, the cabin was just an asset, but to Caroline, it was a home full of memories and meaning. The reality that they had been outmaneuvered by someone they considered insignificant was hard to accept. Caroline, sensing the tension, remained calm. "I understand you are surprised and perhaps even upset, but know that everything I did was out of respect for your father's wishes. He wanted me to care for the cabin, and that is exactly what I am doing." Robert's children, still in shock, realized that Caroline's determination and integrity were unwavering. And though they weren't ready to admit it, a part of them began to understand the deep connection their father had with Caroline and why he chose to trust her with his legacy. Still seated in the cafe, Robert's children looked at Caroline with expressions of confusion and suspicion. The air was thick and heavy with silence until the eldest son decided to break the tension. "So you're saying our father wanted you to have the cabin? What kind of proof do you have of that?" His voice carried a mixture of challenge and skepticism. Caroline, maintaining her calm, opened her bag and took out the letter Robert had written before he passed away. She placed it gently on the table and pushed it towards the siblings. "This is a letter Robert wrote to me before he died. Please read it." The three siblings leaned in to read the letter. As their eyes moved over the words written in their father's trembling hand, their expressions shifted from incredulity to shock, and finally to a silent understanding. The letter clearly outlined Robert's wishes, his gratitude for Caroline, and his desire for her to care for the cabin. "Dear Caroline," began the middle son, reading aloud, "if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer around. I hope this money helps you have a better life." He stopped, swallowing hard as his father's words hit him. The youngest daughter took the letter and continued reading, her voice trembling. "The cabin is now yours, and I want you to use this money to make any improvements you wish and to ensure your well-being. You deserve a chance to start anew, to find happiness and security." Carolina watched Robert's children, seeing their internal struggle as they processed their father's last wishes. She knew it wouldn't be easy for them to accept, but the truth was there, undeniable and clear. "He trusted you," the eldest son finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "And we didn't know." Caroline nodded, her eyes filled with compassion. Robert wanted the cabin to be cared for with love, just as he and Margaret did. I promised him I would honor his wishes, and that is what I am doing. Silence once again dominated the table, but this time there was an implicit understanding. Robert's children realized they had underestimated the depth of the relationship between their father and Caroline. They understood that despite their own prejudices and suspicions, Caroline was the ideal guardian of Robert's legacy. "I'm sorry," said the youngest daughter, tears in her eyes. "We should have listened to our father more closely. You were there for him when we weren't." Caroline reached out, touching each of their hands in a gesture of reconciliation. "He loved you all deeply, and I never wanted to take your place only to fulfill his wishes." The siblings nodded, slowly accepting the situation. They knew it would take time to process everything, but at that moment, they began to see Caroline not as a stranger, but as part of the family their father had chosen. Although there was still a journey of healing and understanding to go, they decided to honor their father's wishes and support Caroline in the legal transition of the cabin's ownership. With Mr. Thompson's help, the legal process was completed quickly. Caroline received all the documents that made her the rightful owner of the cabin. When she finally held the papers in her hands, she felt a mix of relief and gratitude. The journey had been long and painful, but she now had the certainty that she could fulfill the promise she made to Robert. Life in the cabin began to take a new shape. Caroline dedicated herself to transforming that place not only into a home, but also into a symbol of love and resilience. Each day was an opportunity to renew and revive the memories of Robert and Margaret while creating new stories and joys. She continued to tend the garden, now more vibrant than ever. The flowers flourished under her care, and the small wooden bench became her favorite spot for reflections at sunset. The cabin's walls gained new colors and photos, blending the past and present in a touching harmony. News of Caroline's new life spread through the community. Neighbors who once saw her as a stranger began to visit her, curious and impressed by the cabin's transformation. She welcomed them with open arms, sharing stories of Robert and Margaret, and gradually, the cabin became a gathering place, a hub of warmth and friendship. Caroline also dedicated herself to helping other homeless people. Using part of the money Robert had left, she started small support projects, offering temporary shelter and guidance to those in need. Her own experience of overcoming inspired others, showing that it was possible to start over and find a home, even in the most difficult circumstances. Every corner of the cabin breathed new life. The kitchen became the center of warm gatherings, filled with laughter and conversation. Robert's room was transformed into a space of memory, a place of respect and homage to his kindness and generosity. And the living room became a place of conviviality, where old and new friends gathered to celebrate life. Caroline, sitting on the porch at the end of the day, looked at the cabin with a heart full of peace. She knew she had fulfilled her promise to Robert. She had turned a place of sadness and loneliness into a refuge of love and hope. And, more importantly, she had found a strength within herself that she never imagined she had. The cabin, which had once been just a refuge for Robert, was now a beacon of light for many. And Caroline, with her resilience and compassion, continued to honor the legacy of friendship and love that Robert and Margaret had left behind. Thus, the story of that house went on, with new chapters of overcoming and kindness written by Caroline's hands and heart.